the substance of the relationship has not changed and did not change and is unlikely to change unless certain conditions are met. Because there is a lot of similarity in the people, therefore the kind of things we do are also very similar. I think the core problem is none of the disputes between the two countries. The core problem is fear. The core problem is the fear of the Pakistani elite and especially of its national security establishment.
I'll kick off the interaction, and of course your new book, India versus Pakistan, Why Can't We Just Be Friends? Taking off from the title, since you've just released this book, it's been 2 years of this government, Narendra Modi government, and when this government came to power, it appeared that we were on a very, it held a lot of promise for the relationship. PM invited Pakistan Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, he came, and there was a lot of promise seen, a lot of potential seen. 2 years down the line, what do you make of that promise, that potential?
Let me begin by saying that what was described as promise was essentially a lot of symbolism. And symbolism can never be a substitute for substance. The substance of the relationship has not changed and did not change and is unlikely to change unless certain conditions are met. And those are the conditions that I have described in my book. And unfortunately, on both sides of the border, there has been a greater effort in these 70 years to try and point out why we should not be friends than to point out why we should be. As a Pakistani, I can see the weaknesses and the mistakes that have been made by our side. There are very few people on the Indian side that are willing to do that right now. So this contending nationalisms make it very difficult to have a realistic dialogue. If one side totally obsesses about, but why do you exist, then the other side is unlikely to be able to overcome its own paranoia, which I think is a great reality. And so I personally feel that the ideal for India and Pakistan is a relationship similar to that between the United States and Canada. English is spoken on both sides of the United States-Canadian border. Tremendous ethnic and other similarities. And it's not that both sides don't have disputes. There are 9 unresolved disputes between Canada and the United States, which I doubt if anybody in this room knows that there are 9 unresolved disputes between Canada and the United States. But there is a decision that we are going to coexist, and we are not only going to coexist, we are going to profit from one another. In case of the India-Pakistan relationship, that will to have that cooperative relationship does not fully exist. On the Pakistani side, Pakistan has a military that is very entrenched and very powerful. It makes it very difficult for Indian leaders to be able to discuss and negotiate with the civilian leadership, while the military is itself pushing the civilian leadership behind the scenes in one direction or another. It's almost impossible for two nations to move towards normal relations when one is constantly engaged in supporting terrorists against the other. And it is very difficult for normal relations if one country feels that the other still has reservations about the origins of that country. So you have all those phenomena interacting, and under such circumstances, inviting somebody to the swearing in or inauguration, holding hands, those are not things that overcome something. I think a fundamental transformation in attitudes is needed. Pakistan definitely has to get out of the business of terrorism completely, once and for all. India has to get out of the business of making Pakistanis feel insecure about the legitimacy of Pakistan. Now, it's a very psychological thing. Sometimes Indians don't understand. Every few months, somebody here ends up saying, to somebody else, to Pakistan jao. When he says that, somebody in Pakistan says, Acha, there are people there who want people to come here. See, the two-nation theory is correct. Now, if we are going to continue to debate the two-nation theory forever and ever, when for all practical purposes, it's not really applicable anymore, we will have difficulty in normalizing relations. It will be easier to normalize relations when both say, we are two countries, we are two neighbors, we have economic interests, we have political interests, we have we need to work together, and neither one of us should set it as our goal to try to punish the other. And as I keep saying, ending of terrorism is of course key, but ending of the creation of this psychology of insecurity is also important.
Because the title of your book is Why Can't We Just Be Friends? Are we capable of being friends in the current atmosphere?
In it, I cite a very interesting anecdote of Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru saying that we can't be indifferent to each other, India and Pakistan, because we know each other so well. And therefore, we can either be enemies or we can be very close friends. And I see that Germany and France, that had many, many wars, including 2 world wars, hated each other, are now combined in the European Union, and they have open borders, and as a result both are prospering. Taiwan and China have huge trade between them, and both sides travel to each other, and the Taiwanese are not worried that China doesn't recognize them as an independent country, and Taiwan doesn't have the status of a country anyway. I mean, very few countries have formal diplomatic relations with Taiwan, and they are getting along. If all of these nations can overcome their problems, why can't we, when we have so much in common? When I arrive in Delhi, I speak the same language I speak in Karachi. Indians and Pakistanis in England get along quite fine, in America, in Canada. Then disagreement over Kashmir. One side totally denies the existence of terrorism. The other side totally denies the existence of any homegrown problems. And in this environment of denial, rational discourse is not possible. It's the perception of each other as enemy that is the problem. And that needs to be changed. I think that both Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif and Prime Minister Modi sincerely wanted a new foundation for the relationship when they started out. But the ground realities have been such that neither one of them can actually control them, and so you have to shape your policy according to the ground reality. Hafiz Saeed has a stake, or shall we say not a stake, but can drive a stake through the heart of any positive overtures by Nawaz Sharif and Prime Minister Modi.
मेरा सवाल ये था कि because you have been through a wide spectrum of politics in Pakistan, starting from the Jamaat to the PPP to the extreme to the most liberal, and you've been also a regular visitor to India in the last at least 3 years since I've been seeing you in Delhi very, very often. Do you see a parallel between how the Pakistani politics progressed and how the Indian politics in the last 5-6 years has progressed, or any other observation related to that kind of?
I wish I could answer this question in Hindi rather than in English, because the answer would be better in Hindi. लोग बुनियादी तौर पे एक हैं, तो हरकतें भी एक जैसी करते हैं. Because there is a lot of similarity in the people, therefore the kind of things we do are also very similar. For example, denial is very similar. हुआ ही नहीं, क्या कह रहे हो? Similarly, quibbling and arguing, Amartya Sen has written a whole book about the argumentative Indian. Well, guess what? Until 1947, all Pakistanis were Indians too. So argument, endless argument. Sometimes winning the argument is more important than winning the the big picture and winning the relationship. So the political ideologies in India and their shift is also a function. Look, the definition of nationalism in India is changing. And with that is coming an attitude of branding people traitors, branding people, in Pakistan, people are branded kafirs and traitors, and that has been happening for a long time. It's happening with a vengeance in India, and that troubles me and worries me. I prefer a pluralist India. We need to be practical, we need to be pragmatic. Let us talk about the 21st century. Let us talk about a Canada-US relationship. Let's talk about an agreement like NAFTA. We should have SAFTA, etc., etc. And then all of a sudden we find, no, we are now dealing with people who are talking about how Udan Khatolas are the same as modern spacecraft. Then we become worried. That worries us a little bit.
My question was, at the end of these discussions, we always tend to have in writings sort of obligatory 3 sentences that go that, bada bura hai sab kuch, and us side bhi cheezein kharab hai, is side bhi cheezein kharab hai, but we must talk and we must engage. And this is a sort of line that has been there in public discourse, editorial writing, opinion pieces, pretty much for 2 decades now. And one of the things I've always enjoyed about your work is that you don't resort to this piety. Now with the reality that you've sketched out here today and also in your book, what would you advocate as a way forward, given that we are dealing with political actors, with the political compulsions that they actually have, other than simply saying talk, which is something that hasn't led us anywhere?
First of all, there are talks and there are talks. So we must understand, during the Cold War, the Soviet Union and the Americans always talked. But then if you think about it, there were periods in which the Americans reached the conclusion that there will be, that these are talks for the sake of being in touch, not necessarily for resolving disputes or issues. The problem here is that everybody gets very excited every time Indians and Pakistani officials meet. In fact, I have written a couple of op-eds in the Indian Express mentioning that. Okay, but don't get excited. So have engagement without illusions, which is a normal function of international diplomacy, and learn to wait. A major change has to come in Pakistan before a substantive improvement in relations will take place. That major change is not happening right now, but it will eventually, because after all, certain things have their own logic. The Soviet model was unsustainable, maintaining a military the size of America while being much poorer than America. A similar situation is about to occur in the subcontinent. And so my argument is that till that moment comes when we can actually have substantive talks, and talks to essentially open up our relationship instead of expanding our disputes, till such time, maybe the only solution is to wait and not get excited all the time. Every time somebody shakes a hand, we will know that a change is about to occur when we find that Hafiz Saeed has been put out of business, not just put out of Geo TV or ARY TV, but he's been put out of business. He's been told to just go home, not run thing. Jaish-e-Mohammed's business has been shut down. And Pakistan then says, you know what, and Pakistan can say that we have a stake in Kashmir, we consider Kashmir disputed, etc. But that whole terrorism chapter is closed. It will change the dynamic completely.
Ambassador Haqqani, you spoke about the ground circumstances or the ground situation, but are there not those core issues which will have to be resolved? It's fine for you to say that, why can't we be friends, why can't we like Japan and Korea, and you didn't give the example of North Korea and South Korea. Probably we could be much closer with respect to India and Pakistan considering the history. But are there not core issues which you talk to any Pakistani general, retired or serving, you talk to any Jamaat leader or any even PMLN leader for that example. I met a senator in Kathmandu last weekend and she was going on and on. Eventually you have to start with the core issues. All this talk is fine and attractive even, but how do you tackle those core issues? Whether it is Kashmir, whether it is Siachen, whether it is Sar Creek, whether it is the Indus Water Treaty, how do we tackle those?
First of all, there are two approaches. One is first solve the problem, then we become friends. The other is first become friends and then we solve the problems. I think the core problem is none of the disputes between the two countries. The core problem is fear. The core problem is the fear of the Pakistani elite and especially of its national security establishment that normal relations with India would somehow deprive Pakistan of its unique identity that it has built over the last 7 decades. I don't think that is correct. No amount of military actions could save East Pakistan because the Bangladeshis stopped feeling as Pakistanis. And similarly, no amount of repression will be able to keep Kashmir under Indian control if the people of Kashmir do not want. In the end, the people matter. So I think instead of this mantra of solve the disputes and then core issues, I think we need to start having normal relations that exist between nations. What is the solution of the Siachen dispute? There is only one solution possible, which is both sides agree to demilitarize Siachen Glacier. How is it a core issue if a solution is known and nobody is accepting that solution? Kashmir itself. What is the solution of Kashmir? Pakistan says it's a disputed territory, India says it's an integral part because the people of Kashmir are with us. Kashmiri people every now and then show that they are unhappy and there is some restlessness. I personally think India should pay attention to any unrest in Kashmir as genuinely instead of always just blaming Pakistan. It's not fair to just blame it all on Pakistan. But that said, the terrorist groups existing in Pakistan are a reality. And it's not just what India feels, it's what the whole world feels. If Pakistan wants support on Kashmir from the rest of the world, Pakistan will have to end terrorism to be able to get that support from the rest of the world. And I'm saying that as a Pakistani. My view is that disputes and disagreements notwithstanding, normal relations and good relations should still be the main objective.
Haqqani spoke about the innate fear in Pakistan about its existence, and that draws from your earlier book, The Mosque and the Military. Eventually the mosque and the military came together and they called it an anti-India existence for want of a better word. Now that we have a Prime Minister with such a strong mandate in India and the Indian government, what can the Indian government and Prime Minister Modi in particular do to assuage that fear or to take away that fear in the Pakistani mind?
That's a very good question. Unfortunately, I don't have a good answer. There's nothing actually that Prime Minister Modi can do that can build Pakistan's self-confidence. That has to come from within us. You could help, however, your leaders could help by rekindling the image of India as the secular state that it started out as. Now, of course, within India, you have a contending narrative between Hindu nationalism and Indian secular nationalism. That actually feeds frenzy of Muslim nationalism in Pakistan. Maybe the government can rise above that to be able to reassure the average Pakistani that India does not harbor the intentions that are attributed to it in Pakistan. But it won't be an easy policy decision that will help it. There's no silver bullet here, and that's the pessimistic part of my book, that I don't see that happening in the immediate future, unfortunately.